Hello again, my name is Stéphane van Gulick. I'm from France, and today I'm going to talk about how to create beautiful website using PSHTML and Polaris. So in this session, we're going to cover like the PSHTML fundamentals, which is a PowerShell module I'm going to explain everything about. We're going to learn some basic web development skills, just enough for you guys to be able, in the end of this presentation, to build beautiful website, of course. We're going to create static HTML pages using PSHTML. We're going to create dynamic HTML pages using PSHTML and Polaris, and we're going to create a web application fully with PowerShell using PSHTML and Polaris. So the agenda, I have cut this session in three parts. First, I'm going to really have a slow introduction to PSHTML, which also is going to cover some web development stuff. We're going to learn what PSHTML is, how to use it, and some basic and advanced functionality of the PSHTML module. Then in the second step, I will introduce you guys to a tool called Polaris, which is actually for the backend, and same thing, what it is, and some basic usage, and then we're going to combine it together at the very end of this demo, of this presentation, and to show you guys what you can potentially build with PSHTML and Polaris. So, PSHTML, what is PSHTML? PSHTML is a cross-platform PowerShell module. It actually reproduces the HTML language structure. So in other words, it is a DSL, so domain-specific language. So for the people that don't know what a DSL is, if you have used Pester, you know what a DSL is, because Pester is a domain-specific language. And it actually integrates very, very well with PowerShell. So this slide here is more for reference. PSHTML is an open source project on MIT license. Here I have just the links to the GitHub page and also to the Read the Docs Getting Started page, which is a documentation I wrote, which I think is pretty good to start with. But if you've attended this talk, you don't need to go to this link. So to understand PSHTML, let's first start to understand what HTML structure is, what an HTML document is here. So here on the left side, we have an HTML structure. We can see it's actually nodes. So we have an HTML node, a head, and in a head we have the title, and then in there we have some text. So simple example here is written. Then we have a body. In the body we have H2P, some lorem ipsum, etc., etc. That's an HTML structure. On the right side here, we have the PSHTML structure, which, if you compare it, it's actually the same thing. We have an HTML over here, the head here, title, body, H2, paragraph, etc., etc. As a matter of fact, the code that you see on the left side has been generated using the code on the right side, right? So it is pretty straightforward. So if you know how to develop, if you're a web developer and you know how to write HTML structure, you can use this PSHTML model without even thinking more. So, so this is my first demo. I have chosen to record all of my demos and only screen videos because I've seen people fail pretty often. So I don't want to fail. So I could still fail, but voilà, the risks are minimized over here. So I'm going to start very slowly with the basics of PSHTML and more of HTML and web development in general, so that people that are not aware of that they can, get into the train, and then we can go to this journey all together, and it's going to be fun. This is then the introduction. We can see, PSHTML is a cross-platform PowerShell module. It's available on the gallery. You simply do, it's working. You simply do install module PSHTML, and we have get command. We have quite a bunch of commands, and in total we have 91 commands. Most of the commands are actually replications of HTML tags, so p, div, and etc., etc. And there's a strong prerequisites on PowerShell 5. This is a more concrete example, just an HTML structure. We have HTML. Those are all script blocks. We have a title, a link, a body, header, div, paragraph, etc., etc. So this is really not rocket science. I just output it in a variable, and I export that to a file, and then F5, and then here we have the page. So we have the different titles, etc., etc. So I didn't know where to put this one, so I put it here. There's one small thing. There's a, did it pause there? Yeah. So every HTML commandlet from the module comes with a default set of parameters, and I wanted to show you this so you can afterwards build on top of that. So here I have the example of the P. So for paragraph, and every HTML tag has then content, class, ID, style, and attributes. Which, where's my mouse? My mouse is here. Attributes here. So title is specific to the parameter. So content actually asks for a script block. So basically you can add PowerShell code in that script block or other HTML elements. So div inside of that and P, and then spawn and etc. And then, style is for inline style, and ID is to reference I can show you the demo. So, so content, class, ID, style. And I'm just going to do a short example of each of those for different paragraphs. So we have here a P element with the ID, then a P element with a class, inline style, color blue, with a very big font size of 46 pixel, and then some custom attributes. And I will come back to the custom attributes in a few slides actually. So, and I just simply do F5, and it goes into a file, and I open it. And we can see immediately we have the styling in blue, like the very big font size. This page is actually useless. It's not beautiful, but we will get there. And we can see we have the custom ID, the custom class, inline style here, and the custom attributes. Okay, so as a recap, we have for every HTML tag those elements, so content, ID, class, and style. So these are parameters that are available on every HTML tag in PSHTML. And these are actually attributes that you have in HTML. And there's this additional one called attributes to allow you to add parameters that are not available on any of the HTML commandlets. And I come back to that in a second. So we have the content ID class style on every one, and then a lot of the HTML tags have some specific parameters, like the link tag has an href and a rel, which is very specific to this. And so here we can see an example, link, and we have the dash href and then dash rel. And for the script dash src, which means that for example, you cannot find the href on a div, or you cannot find an href on a P, for example, right? And so, because there's so many of them, I didn't implement them all, right? It was way too much work. So this is why we have the attributes. It allows to pass you an array of, not an array, a hash table, where you can give the attribute name and the attribute value. So in case you don't see that parameter that you're looking for, you're not blocked, you have the attributes parameter that you can use. And then I would actually like that you open an issue on a PSHTML repository. And voila. So if today you're searching for a parameter, for example, I go here on W3 schools, I want to create an input box where I want to write some text, and I want to validate that that text is actually an email address, right? So, and for that I'm like, oh, okay, this should work with a pattern, with a regex thing. So if I look at it here, we have it exists an attribute called pattern for the input box. Okay, great. And here I have some demo code, and I'm just going to try. So that's the line that we're going to execute. But here, if we do input and dash P for pattern, we can see the parameter is not present, right? So here you use the attributes just to pass in the pattern, and if you execute this code in a form, then we're going to have this text input box, and basically we can write some text, and it's going to say, okay, this is not what we want. It doesn't respect the regex here in a French way of talking. And still not okay, and then .com, and then okay. And so here it redirects us to other page.html, which is a page that doesn't exist, and that was part of the redirection. So that's only for missing attributes, right? So this is maybe not useful now when you look at this talk now, but I think when you're going to rewatch this video and you're going to start developing, you're going to see some stuff is missing, and this is how you can add it. And so use attribute as a workaround, but please, if you use attribute as a workaround, open an issue on the PSHTML repository so that we add it as a definite parameter in the thing. So another thing I want to talk about is tables. So in PSHTML, it's possible to create HTML tables in two different ways. The first way is to replicate the full HTML full structure using table, t-head, table rows, t-bodies, etc. Or you can do it using a more dynamic way, using a command called convert to PSHTML table, which is going to do all that for you magically. So I'm going to demonstrate here two ways of doing that. On the left side here, on the middle of the screen, we have again a paragraph, and I have a table, caption, and table header with table row and some table headers in it. Then another row with table datas in it, some custom class, and that's it. F5, output it in the file. UTF-8, that's actually pretty important. And that's it. We have here HTML table. And then here, same thing, but using the convert to PSHTML table. Here we can see that I'm getting the 10 first processes on my machine, and I put that in a variable, and then I assign that variable to the dash object, and then I select to show only name and handles. And then again, I output using encoding UTF-8, name handles. And then we can see it's also possible to add some custom classes, styles, everything on different parts of the HTML table. So on the body, on the header, on etc. So we have like a pretty big granularity. And here we have like, so this 10 first processes. Not very useful, but it's for demo purposes so that you understand the basics. And we can see the table rows, the table head, etc., etc. So includes. In PSHTML, it's possible to use something I called include, and it's simply to help you to encapsulate identical code blocks. It's also good for code reuse and to reduce the refactoring scope. So a good example of that is, for example, in the footer page or a menu that you have on one page and you want to have it actually on several different web pages, right? And so you write it in one specific file and you simply call it with an include, and you can reuse same chunks of code, which is also great when you need to update it. So you don't have to go and update it in several places. So here we can see I have two files called body and footer, body.ps1, footer.ps1. In body.ps1, I simply get the first three services and I convert it to a PSHTML table, which we just saw before. And in footer, I just have a paragraph with some copyright thing. Basic HTML structure, as always. Then we do write PSHTML include, and then dash name. And here we have a dynamic parameter, which is going to find all the includes that you have in the folder. And there's also an alias for write PSHTML include called include, and same thing, dynamic parameter. So if you add includes in there, automatically going to be found by the thing. And here we can see the three services that we stopped and the little copyright section at the very bottom. So now we're going to start a little bit with the fun stuff. So we're using PowerShell now in PSHTML because that's all about what we want to talk, right? So it's possible, for example, to integrate existing syntax elements of the PowerShell language into the PSHTML because it's a DSL. So it's possible to add logic like for eaches, do whiles, and all that good stuff. Create functions, actually, as a matter of fact, convert to PSHTML table is just a function, a wrapper around tr,thead, and all that stuff. And I'm just doing a for each and all that other stuff. So here we see the example. I have like my favorite languages, PowerShell, Python, C#, and Bash, which is not actually true. But, and then we have like an unordered list, and then I have a for each. And I just simply go for each element in the languages array, and I print out the list item. And this second element here on the right, you can actually use any PowerShell module. So here I'm importing the local accounts module. I'm simply getting the local group administrators, put in variable, and I'm getting all the members of the local group, and I convert to PSHTML table and output the name and the SID. And down here, select tag is actually for a drop-down box. So again here, for each. So it's possible to use external modules, the Active Directory module, your custom modules, and the elements of the PowerShell language. Everything that you know can actually work in here. So now for the demo. So this is actually what we kind of like saw before, but instead of languages is fruits. Apple, banana, orange, ananases, and unordered list. And then for each element of that unordered list, we create a list item of that fruit. And so here we see we have my fruits and then the unordered list item. Not super sexy, but we will get there. Here, something more interesting maybe. I import the Hyper-V module. I get all the VMs. I sort them by state on my machine. So I know I go a little bit quick here. I organize them by state. Then I convert it to PSHTML table. So I'm going to list all the VMs on my machine. And then I have a second part where I am getting only the running machines. And I want to output the switch name, the MAC address, and the IP address, and convert them to a PSHTML table of the machines that are running. So switch name, MAC address. And so here we have it. At the top we have like the list of my local VMs. 2 are running, and we can see DC001 and SQL001 both have this IP configuration. So again, this is just for demo purposes. Doesn't make much sense here, but voila. Working with assets. So I think about now you should have a kind of like an idea of what is possible to do with something like this. And when you add assets, it's gonna make everything look shiny and super beautiful. So assets is something I call like this. In the web development world, everything is done. So styling is done using CSS, and then the actions and everything is done using JavaScript. And so you have some very smart developers, web developers, or even companies that build their own frameworks, and that help you to do like styling very easily using only classes, for example. And then they have built like amazing JavaScript libraries called GS for everything that has to do with animation on a web page and everything. And this is, of course, something that we don't really manage to do that well in the PowerShell world. But it's possible for us to integrate those, I call them assets, but those frameworks. And so PSHTML comes with 3 assets, so 3 integrated frameworks. So basically, when you do an install module PSHTML, you also have Bootstrap, jQuery, and Chart.js. And I'm going to show you right now what you actually can do with those frameworks. So we can see here in the assets folder, we have Bootstrap, Chart.js, and jQuery. You use a command called write PSHTML asset -name, and then here we have 2 Bootstrap, Chart.js, and jQuery. So it's a dynamic parameter again. So if you add folders, you're going to find it. We have 2 Bootstrap simply because we have Bootstrap has two files, one CSS and one GS. And basically, the dynamic parameter can, if you filter them by type, it's going to find only the good Bootstrap. If you decide not to put any parameter, it's going to write all of the assets that are available in the assets folder. So here we can see the link for the CSS, the script source, the three script files. So here, this is a case where, let's say you have some business logic in a GS file. I'm just creating one JS file here, I'm adding it, I'm re-importing the module, and I'm just executing the code, outputting it in a file. And adding the right asset, and you can see we have the new psconf EU JavaScript possibility. I output in a file. There's nothing to see here except that in the head we have access to this script now. So if you have JavaScript automation in there, you can actually use it, or that the developers can actually use it. So that's for assets. So now we know what a framework is. We know how we can add it in a PSHTML document. And so now let's try to use it, right? And so I mentioned Bootstrap, and it's actually called Twitter Bootstrap. So Bootstrap is just a bunch of CSS file and JavaScript functions that are made available. And for everything that has to do with styling, it really simplifies everything. Bootstrap is really amazing on that part. If you add Bootstrap to any of your HTML documents, it's automatically responsive, which means it's mobile friendly. It's going to scale on a tablet and everything, right? And it's actually very, very popular in the web dev community. So if you have questions or, there's a lot of examples, documentation is well written. It's not something that's very obscure. And it's super easy to use, but like really, really easy. And it's waiting to stay in the picture, okay? And so developing with PSHTML and Bootstrap, let's see how that worked together and what we can build on top of that. So you can see here on the right side, I have Google Chrome open, and on the left side, I'm just importing the HTML module, and at the end, as usual, I'm just outputting the file using encoding UTF-8. Here, I have some basic content, a title, and some paragraphs here and there. And so here we see no Bootstrap. It looks pretty sad, and the objective here is to make that look a little bit pretty. So now I'm just changing the title to with Bootstrap. I am adding the references in the head to the different assets. So actually the framework. So here no parameters, so I'm writing them out. We can see already the font here has changed. It's simply because we have a link to the Bootstrap library, and automatically it does like a little bit of that styling for us. Now here I'm simply going to add a wrap around a div around there. So div is just to kind of like make a small section of code. It's transparent for the user using the website, and I'm just adding something called the Jumbotron. So this is a CSS class. You just put a string in the class thing here, and we can see, boom, we have that gray little area. So I don't really like when it's full width, so I actually here add dash class container, and we see, boom, it's smaller now. And actually, well, we don't see the end of the web page, but it's equalized in the center. And here you might wonder, okay, where can I find actually all that information? Where, what type of classes can I use? Simply Google Bootstrap documentation. You can see here on the left the components things. You can look for it, and then you go look at an example. So here, I wanted to have that green message. It looks nice to make a kind of like a validation of something. We can see here on the right, the class here needs to be alert-success. Copy paste it, add it in it, F5, and here we have it with absolutely no effort. At least not on our side, like Twitter actually created that, so they invested like a lot of time in that. So that was nice, and this is actually technically this was actually a very interesting part for me to write. So this is PSHTML chart is based on a framework called Chart.js. So PSHTML supports the creation of charts since version 7.1. So it has a dependency on Chart.js library, which is one part of the assets. And one important thing is that Chart.js draws charts on something called a canvas. It's actually an HTML tag like div. So it means you need to put a canvas somewhere in your HTML document. So here are the examples of the kind of charts you can do. I support 4 in PSHTML. We have the bar chart on the left, the pie chart on the right, the donut chart on the left, and here the line chart on the right. So charts, there exist more charts in the chart.js library, but those 4 for me were the most common ones. So if you guys think, okay, I would like to have another type of chart, because you know the chart.js library maybe, so just open an issue on the PSHTML repository and we will be happy to look into that. So the PSHTML charts part, and it's actually how the chart.js library is written, is not complicated, but there's a slight learning curve actually that you need to go through if you want to understand how you build a chart. And it's just how it is. It's very slight, and so I hope that in this slide you guys are gonna have some help with that. So first, what you need to do, you need to have data, and it's basically an array of integers. So 2, 0, 1, 4, 2. That's maybe like the amount of tickets that are still open at the end of the day. For example, unresolved tickets. So 2 on Monday, 0 on Tuesday, 1 on Wednesday, etc. Then you need to have a data set. To that data set, you need to pass in that array of data, and you can give it some options. So like a label and a color. So for example, all open tickets from week 42, and then the color, for example, the color of that line, you want it to be blue, right? Or red, or whatever. And then here in green, the chart, which you have to give 1 or more data sets, and I'll come back to that in a minute. And then some options as well, labels, and you can put some other stuff. And here one important thing is to point it to the canvas ID. Remember I said you need to have a canvas, and so you need to say where you want to have that chart that's going to be placed. And of course, because all of that is JavaScript, it needs to be surrounded in a script block, but that's just one additional script block. And so, yeah, let's go in the demo of the charts. Here we can see this is a very easy to understand chart. This is a bar chart. Here we have the canvas I mentioned. I have a reference here to the CDN version of the chart.js library, because that's also possible. And here simply I have like my data, all these number represents something, and then we have like the label, so January, February, March, April, etc. That third line there, we can see we create the data set. The data set is specific to the type of chart that you want to create, simply because the options differ according to the type of chart you want to create. You can give some option like background and everything, and then you give that data set to the PSHTML chart. You point it to the canvas ID, which is over here, and then I'm simply executing the code. And it went on the other screen, so time that I bring it back over here, and here we see like with really very small set of effort, we have like a good looking bar chart, I think, without Bootstrap here. So here in this one, I'm going to present the 4 different charts that you can create in PSHTML. Here we can see I have 4 canvas, 1 for the bar, 1 for the pie, 1 for the line, and 1 for the donut. And then here we can see we have the data. The data is the same that I'm using on all the charts. And we can see we have March, April, and May. Means we have 3 data sets. And I am simply creating a chart of type bar and passing 1, 2, 3 data set, pointing to a specific canvas. And basically I do this 4 times using 4 different types of charts. So all of this is very well documented on that link I said at the very beginning. And so there are more examples there. And so what I want to show is that right here, we see here, this is 1 chart and 3 bars. And actually each of this bar is a data set. So we had 1 color, remember, and 1 label for a data set, which was March, another one was April, another one May. So this is actually, and you can put hundreds of them if you want, and this is actually very good to compare the same data over a amount of time, right? And so this actually works only for bar and for lines, for example, but bar and lines, but not for donuts and for it's a bit confusing because to go on that screen, I have to go that way actually. And so yeah, you see the line here, it's the same data, 3 different data sets on one chart. And then here we can see we have this time a link to a local script, to the local chart.js, which means that to create those graphs, you're not dependent on the internet. And yeah, I wanted to know who knows a report unit? .exe? Okay, a few hands. So that tool was pretty cool. For those who don't know what it is, it's a tool to generate like beautiful graphs of pester reports, and it has like beautiful graphs and everything. But it's an exe file and it's hard coded with a CDN, so it points to the internet. I work in a server field, so I don't have access to the internet on my servers. So it was beautiful on my workstation, and then when I brought it into on a test server, then I saw, okay, I don't have the internet there, and so the report was really useless. So we decided not to use it. Here, this actually gives us new opportunities. So combining everything together. So here, this is a demo here. It's a tribute to Snover, who's a guy who actually does a little bit of PowerShell. And basically, I'm grabbing here an image of his Twitter profile. I am going on his Wikipedia because Mr. Snover has a Wikipedia page, and I'm doing an invoke web request, just grabbing all the paragraphs that's in there, doing some link sanitation, and then I go also on this other thing that I found on the internet called Snoverism, and where's my mouse? Yeah, called Snoverism. It's actually, Snoverism is a website, if you don't know what it is, a website created by Don Jones, where he listed all the funny sentences that Mr. Snover can say, and actually pretty funny. You guys will see. And you see, what I'm doing here, I'm just doing a few invoke web requests. I'm just parsing a little bit the text because it's a little bit rough when I receive it, and then I simply here, for the Snoverism, I output it as an unordered list with a few list items. And yeah, at the bottom here, I have my right PSHTML assets, and here I have generated with love using PSHTML. And then I simply F5, and so I have a Bootstrap integration here, and here we have it. And see, it's like in a little bit, not much work. We have like all the bio of Jeffrey Snover and his Snoverisms, and this one I actually really like. It is the when in trouble, fear or doubt, run in circle, scream and shout. That makes sense. I don't know. It was just funny. I wasn't expecting him to be in my talk, so I'm really honored. Voila. Okay. Yeah. So that's for that. And then, so this may be a more concrete example here. So I manage a user group, the French PowerShell user group, which we have a PowerShell Saturday in September, by the way, in Paris. So before starting this recording, I have authenticated with the Meetup PS, but I'm just not showing my secret keys here. I am so using a module to get the information. I have some links here which I put in a variable, so an A that I put in this variable, and then this variable is used over here, then I use again in this variable here. So it's possible to reuse the code like that. And I have like the famous Jumbotron again from Bootstrap. I added into a container, and some meetup information. Here I have a canvas, so expect to see a chart. And here we have the bar chart that I'm creating, and at the very bottom I export that to a PSHTML table where I only want the properties local date, so yes RSVP count, so that's basically the amount of people that says yes, I will come. So don't consider that as the amount of people that actually arrived, because those numbers are not identical. And then the name of the talk, and here I use the module get meetup event. yeah, get the information and point it to the chart ID, to the canvas ID, sorry. And simply I do F5, and it's gonna take a second, and here we have it. We have, so this is our bar chart, and we can see the number of sessions we had up until now. Oh, sorry. Yeah, so okay, I want to show the numbers of the French PowerShell user group. Here we can see them. We have around 40 people. Okay, it doesn't want to show it. And then just to say that it's possible to reuse the same code, but using just another user group. So I'm taking the example of the user group from Hanover. You're going to see how often they meet, right? And so they meet, every now and then, and they had really big rush in September 2018, which was a PowerShell Saturday, and they have around an average of 10 people. So I imagine that this user group is on-premise, right? Yeah, because our user group is online, and so it allows people to connect from a bit everywhere. That's why. And yeah. And so for the guys who knew report unit, this is an extra thing. So this is kind of like a sneak peek on a module I'm still developing. It's not yet published, where I'm simply gonna try to reproduce that report unit functionality that I could not use. And so one of the drawbacks as well is that one, you need the internet connection, and two, that thing was not cross-platform, right? And this is. So it works on Linux. So here I have some test results in JSON of Pester. I have some custom CSS, and I add the Jumbotron that we know but pretty well now. I have a table here. I don't use the convert to PSHTML table. I actually do, right there. And we can see, I say all these properties I want to have, total count, past count, all that stuff. And I have one canvas over here, and I should have another one a bit lower. So expect to see at least one graph, and actually there are two graphs. So for the ones that know report unit, so this is not super close to, man, sorry about that. This is pretty close to what report unit looks. So I still have some styling issues here, but I'm getting there. Sooner or later, it will look pretty and how I want to have it. And what is cool with this is cross-platform. It works on Linux, on Mac, on Windows, of course. And you don't need to have a CDN, so internet access, right? And those were the two drawbacks of report unit.exe, and voila, it's there. So, snippets, just one part. I didn't know where to put this slide. I put it here. PSHTML also comes with a commandlet called install PSHTML VS Code snippet. For the ones that are a little bit lazy, it's going to install the snippets in the specific folder of the snippets, and then you can do PSHTML, and then you can see there's a bunch of snippets, and here you can see it helps you to do some boiler code with the HTML code, which can be a bit challenging if you're not very familiar with the HTML structures and everything. And so we only have a few, but I'm counting to build really lots of them. But then we'll have 2 kids and everything, so it's time consuming. But okay, so now we arrive to the interesting part. So up until now, we have done this slight learning curve of HTML, and we've created only static and local pages, right? And so now Polaris is going to help us to improve that and make things more dynamic. So what is Polaris? Polaris is a cross-platform minimalistic web framework for PowerShell. It is an open source project by MIT, and it has been written by Tyler Leonard and Mika Reardon. So I think Tyler is maybe not in the room, but at least here. So if people have questions about Polaris, please go to Tyler. And but I think he's very nice, actually. And so the link to the Polaris GitHub page. And so let's have a the demo here, so how does it work? It's on the PowerShell gallery. So I need to click play. It's in the PowerShell gallery, install module, and you import the module Polaris, and then you create something called a root, and then you start Polaris. So here, it's going to create a web server in the background, and then you just go and point to that web server. So here is localhost. It's localhost / hello world, and we can see here we have hello world. And so this was what? 4 lines of code. It's really easy. The next step here, I'm creating a slightly more complex example where / processes, and basically I want to return the first 3 processes of my machine and convert that to HTML. So using the PowerShell convert to HTML, not the, voilà. And so we have a HTML table of the first 5 processes. So, voilà. Not really rocket science, but voilà. It's not limited to only HTTP requests. So if you're comfortable with PowerShell, you can open your shell, do an invoke REST method, point to that URI / hello world, here what I'm doing, and you get the hello world back. So it acts as a REST endpoint as well, which is pretty cool. So this shows a little bit like the possibilities, right? And I just want to recap here how Polaris works, because it's maybe not that very straightforward if it's the first time you hear about it. So first you create a root, so / hello world / whatever, using the dash method. So you can create get, post, delete, put, and some other ones. And in my examples, I've used the get. Then you set the content type that you want to return it. So several ones are available. The most common ones, or the ones I've used up until now, is text plain, text JSON, text HTML. It's simply for the web browser or anything that's going to read the return value to. He knows how he's going to process the stuff. Then optionally, you can publish static files. For example, if you want to have access to Bootstrap or other type of libraries, you use public static root, but I will show all of this in a demo. And then you start the Polaris server, and that's it. You're done. A very basic example here, I import the Polaris module, and I have 2 roots here, 2 get roots. You can see new Polaris get root. And then we have, the path is like psconf test, and I set the content, so $response is what you have, it's a variable that you automatically have in the script blocks. You set the content type to text HTML. I send here back P, so that's, the P element is from PSHTML. I create a paragraph here, and I simply say hello conf, psconf. And then I send that variable HTML back. And that's it. That's pretty easy, right? Same here for whoop, there was just another root here, so it's possible to go /whoop, and then you're gonna get back, right? And then you start the server. So this is the basic of what you need to do for a Polaris web server endpoint. And so those 2 roots here are now in, let's say, that same server file here, but I would recommend not to do it like that, because it can be pretty messy, or the code of a root can be pretty big, and so if you have a lot of roots, you're going to have a lot of code in there, so I think it's good to separate it. And so in the example I'm going to show, I have separated that in files, and I'm just .sourcing them, so just you're aware of it. And so now we're going to combine everything all together, PSHTML and Polaris. So yeah, I have 1 minute left, so that's actually perfect. Okay, so okay, that's good then. Yeah, so here in this, so I'm going to have 2 videos here. The first one I'm going to show you kind of like an application I've built. It's nothing big, but super small, but just so that you understand the power of those 2 things combined together. And then I'm going to show in a second video how the code is built, how I've built that. And of course, this code is going to be available on GitHub in the psconf part. So I launched the app. It was on my other window. And then we see here, so you recognize the Jumbotron from Bootstrap. I have here PSHTML loves Polaris, of course. And then we have like so I do a list of all the local admins on my computer. We can see I have 4 or 5 users here. I simply do a convert to PSHTML table here. And at the very bottom, I have 2 parts, add user and remove user. I've here then the possibility to create a user. I give it, so psconf user, I give it a description and a password. And then I simply validate. So then I have a validation message and then saying that it's going to redirect in 3 seconds. And then I come back and you see that now in the admin group, I have this additional local user, right? And if you look in the list, automatically it got refreshed. We have that new psconf user. And also in the drop-down box there below, this psconf user is there. So now we click remove, it's going to remove it. And it's going to say, okay, has been removed, redirect in 3 seconds. And then come back, the psconf user is not there anymore, and it's not in the list, and it's not in the administrators group, right? And this is 100% PowerShell, right? There's no magic. Everybody understands this, right? And so there's also some error handling in the background here. So, for example, I have a user called Whoop. The user actually already exists. That's a dummy user I have on my machine, and you can see it's over here. And see, it didn't add it to the list, and so there's also some try and catch here in the background. So that's a basic application of PSHTML with Polaris together. So how does this work? How is this built? We have this folder structure. So I have a server.ps1, which you can see here, where we have like the start Polaris and all of that, and then I have my styles in those folders, so Bootstrap and everything. So basically you can point it. See, I'm creating a new static root here to that styles thing. But actually you can point it to the assets folder of the PSHTML module, and it will work the same way. In roots here, I have individual files for every root. One for add user, one for index. Index is actually that main page. And one for remove user. And so let's have a look at all of these roots, each of these roots. So here we have the add user. The first thing I do, so $response is an automatic variable in Polaris, and you use that to do everything that has to do with the response you want to send back. So first thing you need to do is set the content type. I want to set it here to an HTML document, and I do some here URL decoding magic, simply because I am so that's the request, that's what I get from the form, and I will come back to that in a minute, because those buttons were actually form elements of an HTML document, and I simply parse it here, and I convert to from JSON, and I have an object with which I can work with. So then I simply go and create a password and new local user, and then give it like this is just simple PowerShell that you would do in a regular PowerShell script. Getting the local group, adding the member, and then I create a message here. See, I have a try catch. So if, okay, I have, see the classes of Bootstrap, so alert success. So that was the green message we had before. And if it failed, it would go into this catch method. So here we have also the message, and so alert danger. And then at the end here, I have an HTML variable where I have a very small, tiny part of a HTML document with some Bootstrap links, and here just a div with the message and the redirecting in 3 seconds. And that's it. And so actually the remove part is the remove part works actually the same thing. And see $response.send HTML, and that's it. And so remove is exactly the same story. I set the content type to text HTML, URL code, and then I get the group based on admins here, get the local user by SID, and then I remove the user. And then again at the end, I simply send the HTML document back, and that's it. And it's Polaris who's going to handle it, or the web browser. And then we have the index page, so that's the main. So we saw the 2 roots. And now we can see the main page. The index page is where we landed at first. And on there, we're going to see we have two form elements. So, yeah, first we have the links to our different assets. So the different styles, so the styles that have been published using the new static Polaris file, I think. And then I have my convert to PSHTML table with the list of local users. And here we have a form for add user. And so this is actually where the magic happens. And this is actually what PHP also does, but it does it, not with PSHTML. And we can see we have the form, the action here is /remove user. So basically when you click submit, the submit button is going to redirect you to your server name /local user or whatever you put here in this action here. And so here it was to the /remove user that was actually a Polaris root. Polaris root did the remove user stuff and then it went further. And so here we have the remove user. The select tag is for the drop-down box. Select tag. Why do we added the tag? Simply because select is a keyword in PowerShell. It's an alias for select object. So if there's a conflict with a PowerShell keyword, we add the word tag behind it. And yeah, what's also important is like the enc type here, application x ww form. Voilà. And so, but you don't need to know this. You can do tab, and you know there's like a validate set. It's I'm helping you there with the module. And yeah, basically that's it. That's there was like the big application and some examples in the field actually of PSHTML. So I asked on Twitter, okay, if some people actually implemented PSHTML in production because I didn't do it before, and I was actually surprised about the answers. And there was one person, Keyboard Crunch, which don't know who that is. If he's here in this conference, I would like to meet him. He sent me a picture of this screen. So this is a 69-inch screen in his office that they have there, and they use PSHTML to have a report on their Windows updates compliance. So he uses PSHTML in combination with the config manager commandlets to get the compliance of their updates. And voila, it's there. So that was pretty interesting. Ravi Kanta also told me he was demonstrating his work, what he created with PSHTML at PSConf EU, and I think it's tomorrow morning, I think at 8:30, I'm not sure, but go check Ravi Kanta's session. He's pretty interesting speaker. So Chen Drayan, so this guy is really amazing because he helped me so much in just trying things out, and he comes up with ideas and with everything. And so, for example, I showed today this with Polaris, right? The backend is Polaris, but we don't actually have to use Polaris. It's also possible, for example, to use Node.js or Go, right? And so because it makes everything very versatile, and yeah, this is simply fantastic. So Chen has created like a requester information form using Azure functions and everything, and Node.js, which is pretty interesting also, I think. Links are in the very end of this session. He also has a talk about Polaris and PSHTML in PSConf Asia, the 20th of September, in case you're interested. And this one was pretty interesting. It's actually a colleague of mine from work. He came to me and was like, look what I've built. I was like, oh, but wait, I know that. So I masked here some of the server names, some of the information, and actually he created a tool to create SQL reports on the compliance of is everything okay or not? And so first level support and second level support can use that as an information tool. And thought it was surprising that my coworker used it without me even knowing it. And it was pretty funny. So I arrived to the end of this demo, 54 minutes. So basically, you've learned what the basics of PSHTML. You've learned the basics of Polaris. We've used assets, so external frameworks. We've seen it's possible to add other frameworks. So Bootstrap is not the only framework there in the world. There's a lot of other ones that you can use. We've created charts We have used existing modules inside of HTML code actually, and we've created static pages at the very beginning, simple ones, dynamic one, and in the end we have a web application. Here are the links, just for reference to the different ones. So yeah, go check the Chen's blog. He really has a lot of things about PSHTML, and sometimes I ping him on Facebook and say, hey, how did you do that? And he just sends me like the information. It's pretty cool. And yeah, voilà, this is the end of my talk. So are there any questions? Okay. Thank you. Are there any, do we have time for questions? Yeah. Are there any questions?
Yeah, 5 minutes.
Okay, we have 5 minutes for question? Yeah, I see.
Okay. Did you try to implement some request clients with the REST endpoints? Because if I'm coming from PowerShell and invoking REST method, you gave me a JSON back, and if I came from a browser, you gave me the HTML back.
Yeah, so you can you can set the content type of what you want to have back, right?
Yes, but on the same REST endpoint.
I think that is possible. So for that, I would forward you to Tyler, right?
Okay.
Maybe I can make you guys meet. I've not done it personally, but I imagine it's possible. Maybe by just doing a simple if-else statement according to what how it has been called. Actually, I imagine that in the $response or in the $context, which are two automatic variables in Polaris that you have access to in the root. If we look into that, I'm pretty sure we can find some possibilities to filter on that, but I don't know for sure. Tyler can answer that question. I'm definitely will.
Thank you.
Yeah. Some other questions? Yeah.
Is it possible to update content dynamically on the website? Like update an object every 5 seconds, so every 5 seconds a script is run in the background?
Yeah, it's actually possible. So, but it's kind of like a hack. So normally this is done using JavaScript. So if you know how to do JavaScript, you can simply write JavaScript, put it in an asset, in a JavaScript file, put it in an asset and call JavaScript there. But it's also possible
without reloading.
What? No, so it's like you can use something called a meta tag, where you can say kind of like automatic refresh, and you give it like a number of minutes. And this is what I did with the redirection in 3 seconds, right? And so, I don't know. Yeah, I will show you maybe offline, but it's possible to do a refresh. And so you can say, I want to refresh this page every 30 seconds. And it's going to act just like if you had like a task schedule that's going to start every 30 seconds. Does that answer your question? Or does it, okay. Other questions? No? Okay. Yeah. Well, I think you need to wait for the running lady.
Sorry, you had you're running the interactively when you're sort of testing the code. How do you run it as a service when you're wanting to just run it?
So as a service, I don't know, because PSHTML is just the front end, right? I'm just rendering the language. And in the end, the language, HTML, is just text, right? And so what you have in the background, so that's Polaris or Node.js, right? And so then we have to look into Polaris, right? And so I think Polaris can be run as a service, but I'm not super sure. I know Node.js is super possible, and really Node.js is not more complicated than what we saw over here. We all know how to write PowerShell, so if we know how to write PowerShell, we can at least read JavaScript code. Node.js is JavaScript code, so it's really not that difficult to implement that. And I would really recommend that you guys go through this website from Chen and read this link about Node.js and PSHTML, because it's very simple. Okay. Sorry. What? Yeah. So Chen did it. Like Chen is so the question was if this app, for example, can be hosted. Yeah, absolutely. So Chen, for example, hosted on Azure Functions and on Azure, right? And so all of the stuff that Chen does is, so I'm developing just the PSHTML module, and he really uses it on Azure, and he uses it in Azure with Azure Function. I think he also has a thing with Node.js. So yeah, absolutely, it's completely possible.
It can be accessed normally from any, like any other website, normal website, to be accessed outside.
Sorry, I didn't.
It can be accessed normally, like any other website normally.
Yeah, but then it's regular web stuff, right? So if you want to query a specific URL, it's actually in the end just an IP address, right? So you need to have a DNS and everything, right? So that route. So here on my examples, I have localhost / remove user, for example, but localhost is just because the web server has been created on localhost. But I can just put it on the web server, and then I create a DNS entry, and I point it to that thing, and then I just communicate that URL, and then everybody can potentially use it, right? That's super easy, actually. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Other questions? Oh, okay. I'm disappointed. I thought you were going to do another question. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so I think it's a wrap. Okay, thank you.